Today we're going to talk about systems, and I'm going to do a little bit of philosophy, but mostly it's just down and dirty tactical stuff and, specific examples of systems. So I hope that's what you signed up for. But this is kind of, examples of how it works, but hopefully definitely some principles as well that you can sort of take away. So very, very quick sort of, I think, you all know me, so it's fine. The one thing I will mention, every week I drop in a new bit of information about me. But the other bit of information that you don't know that's relevant today is that I'm also a trained business coach. So I've actually spent quite a bit of time working with my authors and other people to help them get their businesses running better. So that's kind of a very integral part of, you write a book as a marketing tool for if you're writing a business book, and it's got to work with your systems. So that's something that I'm really kind of alive to all the time. So a very quick reminder again, the three elements of the model that I work with: story, strategy, and systems. So we started with story. Last week we talked about strategy. This week we're on systems. What this basically equates to is the what, so what you're going to write about, which was the story we did back in the first week, that the why, the whole how this is going to help your business, why you're doing it in the first place. And today we're going to talk about the how. So just to put it into context of the whole thing, so it's all about the implementation piece today, the systems that you need to put in place to make all that good stuff happen. And I love this quote by Albert. It's kind of a mantra for me that everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. And those, I think, are two really important complementary pieces. So keep everything that you're looking at today in the lens, look at it through the lens of that quotation. If you don't need it, don't use it. And if you do need it, think how to make it as simple as possible to make it work for you. And this is the philosophical stuff that I promised you. These are the sort of principles that I hold to for systems, because it can be a real rabbit hole. We are awash with cool tools and new shiny things and free webinars promising, follow these simple steps and this will solve all your marketing problems. And also recommendations from people. Oh, have you tried such and such? And oh, I love this. And it is so easy just to go sort of chasing after the latest shiny thing and be really, really impressed by features and functionality. So I think if you, keep Einstein's quote in mind and follow these principles, keep it as simple as possible. So as many as necessary, as few as possible is the kind of reworking of the Einstein quote for systems. Make them as connected as possible. Join them up wherever you can. There are some tools that integrate natively, which is brilliant. But even if they don't, you can use Zapier as a brilliant sort of free tool that will allow you to hook up different systems. You want to take out as much duplication and as much manual intervention as you possibly can from your processes, because honestly, if something's going to go wrong, that's where it's going to go wrong. And it's also going to be very, very tedious if you sort of make a rod for your back that you have to sort of do this and then copy it over here every flipping week. It's going to be a nightmare. Ease of use, kind of obvious, but I always think that the rule of thumb is that is it actually going to be easier to use this system than not to use it, or than to use a spreadsheet, or whatever the kind of default easy thing is. If it's not, then you probably will end up not doing it, and that will just be a waste of everybody's time and energy. And and it's got to work, it's got to be effective, and tools have got to be slaves, not masters. They've got to help you do and be better in your business. And if they're not really doing that, if they're just too over-spec'd and they're not really helping you, or they don't quite do the core thing you need them to do, so you're trying to do a workaround, you probably need to look for something else, or just drop it completely and do something low-tech. So we're going to look at, we are going to look at the book. I promise you, the whole thing is really going to be talking about the book and the systems around that. But I just wanted to introduce you to the idea of a tech stack. If you haven't already met that, just quick show, are you all familiar with the idea of a tech stack? Show of hands if you are. No, Ellen's going, no. Okay, well, good. This is for Eleanor at least then. Eva's going, no. Great. All right. So whether you have ever drawn it out or thought about it like this or not, your system has a tech stack. It's a suite of systems and tools that work together to help you do what you do. So here's ours at Practical Inspiration Publishing. You can see, you might need to move your Zoom panel of people up to the top to see it fully. Just drag it up there, and you can see that we've got the sort of the big stuff. So we've got the big blocks of stuff that we do along the top. So we've got business development, got customer relationship management, creative stuff, so content stuff, ops, just operations, what we actually do in publishing and so on, collaborative tools, and admin, the stuff that supports everything else. You can see our core systems there are in bold. These are the stuff. This is the stuff without which we basically can't function. And the other stuff is a bit more swap it in and out and just find the best thing that works for us at the time. So the biz dev stuff includes obviously our websites, social channels. The websites obviously includes WordPress and WooCommerce, which is the e-commerce bit, and also back-end integrations with the warehouse. So there's quite a lot under the hood of websites. And then social channels for us, that's primarily Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we schedule those posts using eClincher. I'm going to come on to this in a minute. So I won't take you through the whole thing. You can read it. And I'm very happy to, if there's any tool there that you haven't heard of or you're quite interested to hear more about, then brilliant. But what I really want you to take away is that sense of looking at, okay, well, what is it that I have to do? And what are the tools that can help me do that? And then how do they fit together is the other really, really crucial part. And again, apply that Einstein principle at every stage. This is not a competition to see who can get the most tools in any one category. Okay. So with that in mind, oh, can't move my thing on. We go. Can you still hear me? Yeah, great. Here's the book systems map that we're going to look at today. And I'll be honest with you, I don't normally put choose in here, but Lily specially requested that I talk about some tools for helping you choose which damn book you're going to write. So I've added that in today. So the sort of core blocks, so correlating to those columns that I had in the business tech stack, we've got choosing your book, planning your book, researching it, writing it, editing it, and publishing it. And in the middle, huge, great blob for marketing, which just kind of runs through all of it. And you start it from the very beginning and it carries on, you know, way past the very end, goes through all the stages. So I'm going to treat that separately. So, ready to go in? Let's look at choosing your book first. And I've got two tools that I kind of, you know, use with authors to help them to do. Firstly, the priority quadrants. And this is not just for books, of course, this is for any decision that you have to take, but it's a really, really helpful way of thinking about different options. Honestly, you could just choose the book that most appeals to you to write. And a lot of people do that. But if you want to be a little bit more scientific about it, you know, because my grandma had this great quote, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So you need some sort of way of choosing what you're going to do first. So this is taken from Agile software, where the team's got to decide which items, which features from the backlog they're going to prioritize for inclusion in each development sprint. And there's quite a lot of very lightweight, very effective tools that have come out of that discipline. And I use quite a lot of them in book development, which are really, really helpful for prioritization particularly. And this is one of the simplest. It's priority quadrants. Basically, you map all the, well, in software, it would be all the features that you're considering. In writing a book, it would be all the titles that you're considering against those two axes. So that's on the bottom there, the likely positive impact, oh, on the top, the likely positive impact on the business on the left-hand side there. And then on the bottom, the effort required. So the ones you want to be pursuing basically are those in quadrant 1, the ones that are giving the highest return on investment for the lowest effort, the biggest bang for the smallest buck, as it were. It doesn't need to stop there. And in fact, that might not be the right thing for you. You might want to do something that's really going to stretch you and develop you. So it's worth looking at quadrant 2 as well. So quadrant, yeah, so you've got the stuff that takes a lot of effort, but it is going to have a major impact. I'd say with a book, I'm really sorry, that's my dog. With a book, the thing that's going to give you the biggest revenue impacts and biggest effort is probably only worth doing if it's part of a bigger shift in that direction that the whole business is taking, because otherwise you're going to be putting effort into the book that simply isn't going to be working for you in the business. But if you do want to make a shift in your business, then it could be really helpful to use a book as a kind of engine to get you there and to get, you know, the research process underway, to connect with the right people. That can be really, really valuable. So both 1 and 2 are worth looking at. 3, I guess, is your quick wins. You know, these are the things that could be maybe developed. It could be a book if you want to get one out quickly. Could also represent, you know, possible new products, maybe talks or blog posts or a free ebook maybe. And then quadrant 4 is it's just the graveyard of ideas. Don't go there. You know, why would you want something that's going to take you loads of effort and not give you very much return on it? So that's one really simple way of just kind of mapping out ideas, and even just getting the clarity. Even if you decide, as I say, to go with something in quadrant 2 that is going to be a lot of effort, at least you know why you're doing it. But if the quadrant thing is just a bit too blunt a tool for you, this is something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more personalized. This is a decision grid. And of course, this is just an example. You know, what you need to do is identify the key success factors for your book. So what really matters to you and what do you really want it to achieve for you? Basically, how are you going to measure whether it's successful or not? And then you just create a grid. So along the top there, you're going to put the key success factors for you. And down the side, you're going to put the various titles that you're thinking of, and you just score them. You know, this is one that I did with a client a couple of years ago now. You know, how quick is it going to be about right? How well does it fit with the target client? How well does it fit with what I've got planned in the business over the next year or two? And what kind of opportunities does it give me to build my network strategically? Those were the sort of, these are quite generic things and quite useful, but you might have something really specific. You just literally give them a score out of 10 and add them all up. I did have an author who took this really seriously. He had this grid, it had about 15 categories, and then he didn't just have like ball score, he weighted them because some were more important than others. I mean, he must have spent hours on it. I do suspect that what he did was massage the weighting to mean that he ended up writing the book that he wanted to write, which you can like sort of rationalizing it post hoc. And honestly, that is fine. Sometimes you just have a really strong gut instinct about what you need to do, and you go for it. But at least if you've done this sort of thinking, you're kind of going into that with your eyes open, and you've thought about the alternatives, and that's really powerful. So, okay, Lily, got a couple of ideas there? Excellent, good. So we'll go on to planning, and I already talked about this in the story. Your working table of contents, it's just the most powerful tool that you've got. But here's some other tools to think about and some other tools to get you there as well. And yeah, the cool tech really starts to kick in here. So you have to be, have that Einstein vision on and just make sure it's going to work for you, because you can absolutely plan your book with nothing more sophisticated than a big bit of paper and a pencil. That's really all you need. And a lot of people do it that way, and that's absolutely fine. I actually, just as a side, I don't use flip chart paper anymore. I use a roll of paper. IKEA do these rolls, and you can just keep going, and it's brilliant. I use it when I'm coaching as well, because so often you're constrained and you stop mind mapping when you reach the edge of the paper. But if you've got one of those big rolls, you can just keep going. It's fantastic. So a step up from paper and pencil is post-it notes, and the way I recommend people do that is, you start by just batting out ideas. You just get as many ideas of things that need to be in this book as possible, and then you start clustering them, and before you know it, what you've actually created is a kind of chapter structure for the book. And if you can commandeer a wall in your house or the biggest table in your house or something, then you can keep it up there for a few days and keep adding to it, keep refining it, and that's really, really helpful. You can Trello. Does everybody know Trello? Quick hands up. Yeah, quite. Oh, good. All right, people know Trello. I use Trello a lot. We as a team use Trello a lot. And Trello is actually really good for planning a book. So you may not have considered it for that, but actually, if you think about it, that once you've done all your work with your post-it notes, if you can translate that to a Trello board, you're away, and it's a really kind of lightweight way of having it with you all the time, and your family can have their dining table back, so that works well. And there's also mind map software, and this is where the cool tools really kick in. There are loads and loads of them. I don't know how to say it, IO, not sure, but there's Mind Mapper. There's lots and lots of different tools. I don't ever honestly use these from the get-go, because I just find them too constraining. But I do use them. Coggle is another one that I use, actually. Once you're reasonably clear on what you want, it's a good way to just capture it visually, and again, have it with you all the time. But I do have an author who works natively in mind mapping software. That's just how she does it. She can't think without it. So again, just find out what works for you. But there's different ways of planning your table of contents, basically. It doesn't have to just be a linear list. In fact, it shouldn't be a linear list. It should be much more fluid and branching out from the big concepts than that. Another tool that's really, really helpful with the planning is, I've just sent this out. I mean, it looks horrible, sorry, but it's just literally taken from an Excel spreadsheet. And it's a tool that I sent out to my boot campers in week 6, which is exactly where we're on the boot camp at the moment. And it's just a really crude, I've cropped the top off just so you could see the whole thing there. You plug in your variables at the top, which is, 2 of 3 variables, how long the book is, when you want to finish, or how many words a week you're going to write on average. And it just gives you like a straight line tool for at any date. This is roughly how many words you should have written. Very crude, very blunt, but it's just helpful to know how you're doing against your target. And it also forces you to think about the amount of time that you're going to need for revising, which is more than you think. We'll come on to that in a bit when we talk about editing. So yeah, just really, really helpful, dead simple, crude, ugly spreadsheet, but stick that behind your computer and you've just always got a sense of where you need to be. Creates a bit of urgency if you notice yourself getting behind. So that's really helpful. Well, it's helpful for me. It might not be helpful for you, but again, choose everything that works for you. And then the last planning tool I'm going to talk about, I could go on about this all session, but I promise not to. This is the cornerstone of my business. It's the cornerstone of anybody who's working with me in the mentorship group, which I used to run when we could meet in person, but even when I'm just coaching as well. Really encourage people to set up a 90-day plan. And I don't insist on these categories, but in terms of reflecting how I kind of work as a coach, this is what it's all about. So the progress on the book, what you want to do with your platform, your profile, the stuff that we've talked about in story earlier on, your network building, which is what we touched on last week in strategy, and your business, of course, your business goals, and yourself, because it's so easy to forget that. So what are the things that you want to achieve personally as well? And you actually start with a year goal, but for the sake of this plan, you start with your 90-day goals. And I do this quarterly. So, by the end of this quarter, where do I want to be in each of those areas? And you set those out, and then you kind of pull the time horizon back in. Right. If that's where I'm going in 3 months' time, what do I need to achieve by the end of this month? And then you can get really tactical and specific and say, well, what do I need to do this week? And the important thing about this is that you use it and you come back to it and you set up a kind of rhythm for your business and for your planning and reviewing. It's what Michael Gerber calls working on the business rather than in it. So it's my cycle of review is well, the weekly, I must be honest, I don't always do the weekly, but that's the one that slips. But ideally, weekly, you're just going to be reviewing those actions. You're going to be taking off the ones you've done, putting the next ones on to get you to those 30-day goals. Every month, you're resetting those 30-day goals. And every quarter, you're setting the quarterly goals and basically doing a new 90-day plan. Annually, I can set aside half a day for the big strategic thinking and saying, well, what do I want to achieve this year? And if you can set that kind of rhythm up for your business planning and bake it in, you put it into your calendar, make it sacrosanct, it's incredibly powerful at just keeping you focused and getting stuff done, and also allowing you to see you getting stuff done, which is highly motivating. So that's really good. So that's planning. A little bit on research. Every single book is going to involve some level of research. Some are going to involve vast quantities of research. Some aren't going to involve much at all because they're much more personal. It's going to be your story or something. But whatever you're doing, you need to be doing a little bit of research to really bring something original and thoughtful in there. So typically you're going to be looking at desk research, also known as Googling, but also, reading articles, reading books, that kind of thing. You're also going to be talking to people. And this is, as we said last week, it's a fantastic opportunity for, reaching out to people that you want to build a relationship with and asking people, what do you find about this? And it helps you kind of aerate your ideas. It helps you develop your thinking. And it also means that you're bringing into your book other people's stories and other people's voices, which is really helpful for the reader. In terms of the systems that you use to manage this, again, I've had people use all sorts, from literally, black and red notebooks to index cards to, just folders in a document on their folder structure in Word, ring binders. People do this also with a private blog. That was a really interesting one. But there are some really interesting so it doesn't have to be online is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be a cool tool. It can be just whatever you normally use to capture your ideas. But Evernote is a really useful tool, I found, for capturing ideas when you're out and about. That's the problem with using a notebook, is that it's not with you when you need it. So if I always have my best ideas on runs, actually. So I've been known to sort of stand in the middle of a field and just dictate myself a note and email it to Evernote because it's just easier. So it's just really helpful, lightweight way of organizing all your stuff. This is, yes, snapped from mine, and I just literally took a picture of a book that I was reading and just scanned it in there because I was out in a coffee shop. So it was really, really helpful. So if you don't use Evernote, it's worth a look. It's very easy to use, very, very flexible. And it's also, you can collaborate, you can share things, which is great if you're working in a team as well. So that's it for research. I'm going to come straight onto writing, but this tool, Scrivener, again, quick show of hands. Anybody heard of Scrivener? No? Okay, so Scrivener, oh yeah, Ellen has heard of it, brilliant. It's a very popular writing tool, and it's also great for research. You can see this is the cork board view, and you can put stuff in there. This is literature taken from Scrivener. It's got a whole kind of research section that you can add to your book, and you can link into the chapters, and it means if you never lose a reference again. I like Scrivener because you can set a target, and it gives you a little green light and a ping when you've hit it, and that's really great. Sometimes that's all that kept me going. I have to admit, though, full disclaimer, I tried Scrivener. There were things about it I really loved, but I just found it a bit too clunky. And in the end, I exported it and I went back to Word. And I'm going to come on to what you can do in Word to make it easier to work with in a minute. But Scrivener is definitely worth a look. They do a free trial. If you like software, if it's important to you that you can do your research and your writing in the same place rather than kind of keeping them separately, it is definitely one to look at. The people that love it really love it. And if you can get over that software hump, then it's definitely worth trying. But if you can't, then by all means use Word, which is, to be honest with you, the kind of standard format in which the publisher is going to want the manuscript anyway. But if you're going to use Word, for goodness sake, use Word styles. So there's a couple of reasons for this. What I'm showing you here is the outline view of my book, which went to typesearch a couple of years back now. But what it allowed me to do was, in Word you get the option at the top of view, and normally you're probably looking at print layout. If you change that to outline view, what it means is if you've identified headings, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so on, you can then choose. You can see it says up here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, show level, and I've got level 3 showing there. I could show the whole thing all, and then you get the full manuscript, or I could show level 1 or 2, and you can just kind of collapse it or expand it as you want. There's a couple of reasons why that's brilliant. One is that you can see the whole thing and it just kind of feels more manageable psychologically. The second is you can just navigate round. So if you're trying to find something in your manuscript and it's 50,000 words in one document, that's quite hard. If you can collapse it like this, you just put the cursor on the right heading and you're immediately in there. So it's good for navigation. It's also good just for helping you see that this is basically what's going to become your table of contents. So what's it going to look like? Are those headings consistent? Have you got lots of subheadings in one chapter and none in another? It just gives you a sort of sense and a checkpoint of what the book is looking like structurally at any one point. And then the final reason for doing it is that typesetters and copy editors will love you for it, because it means that you've got consistency. Very often if you're writing a book, you'll have a subheading and you'll make it 12-point bold Arial. And then the next time you have a subheading, you forget that you used Arial and make it 14-point italic. And then the copy editor is going, is it different? Is there a reason why these are different? And there's not, it's just that you forgot. So if you're using structural markup rather than trying to remember how you coded it last time, it's just so much easier. So if you haven't explored word styles, it's really, really worth, they're actually really simple to use, and I can't recommend them highly enough. And I'm speaking as a publisher who just dies a little inside when they get a Word document that doesn't have word styles in it. So happy to answer questions on that at the end, but it's a great, lightweight, accessible tool. And then just before we leave writing, I'm going to come on to the Pomodoro. Ellen's going, oh yes, I like the Pomodoro. I bloody love the Pomodoro. Again, quick show of hands, everybody heard of this? No, oh, you are in. This is, if you take nothing, yes, I was going, I know this. If you take nothing else away from today, honestly, this is magic. It was developed by a student called Francisco Cirillo, and he used his mum's kitchen timer, which was shaped like a tomato, which is why it's called the Pomodoro technique. Italian for tomato is Pomodoro. And he literally set the timer for 25 minutes, worked like a demon, full focus for 25 minutes, and then when it pinged, he took 5 minutes off. And the full system is, I think you do something like 8 Pomodoros in a day. You do 4 and then you have an hour with 5 minutes between each. And I've never, ever in my life done a full day of Pomodoros. It's just like, my life doesn't work like that. I don't know about you. But do you know what? If you can get one solid Pomodoro done on your writing every day, you'll be amazed at how quickly your book takes shape. the critical thing is that while those 25 minutes are counting down, you do nothing else. It is just a tool for helping you find full focus. You shut down all your notifications, you shut down all your distractions, you shut down Facebook, or, you know, whatever is your guilty little kind of distraction secret, and you just focus on what you're doing. And it's, of course, it's not just for writing, it's for anything that needs your full attention, the deep work, as Cal Newport says it. And 25 minutes is short enough that you can sustain that kind of full focused energy. Much longer than that, and you start to flag. And the fact that you've got 5 minutes off, or however long you give yourself, is great as well, because, you know, when you get the little itch to, oh, I wonder what they're doing on Twitter, you know, it's all right, 15 minutes time, I can go and check, and you've got that time built in where you can go and do whatever you need to do. But it's just, yeah, again, life-changing if you haven't discovered it. So that's the Pomodoro. Tomato-timer.com is the one that I use, which is just an online one, which is super easy. If you can do 2 or 3 or 4 Pomodoros a day on your book, you're going to have it done in a matter of weeks rather than months. It's incredibly effective. So, onto editing. Once you have written your first shitty draft, and not a moment before, you can start editing. They do say the books aren't written, they're rewritten, but it is really important that you might have to do some editing because you're putting stuff out in blogs, or you need to send sample chapters to publishers. Fine, you have to do that. But generally, as a rule of thumb, just write, just get it all down, because what can happen is you spend ages refining chapter 1 and you never get any further. And I know so many people who've done that. They've got the most beautiful chapter 1. But if you get the full thing down, A, you'll get more insights as you go, which will help you refine things later on. And B, you've got a full thing to work with. So it's like a sculptor trying to sort of, you know, get a perfect sculpture. You wouldn't just sit and chisel out the foot or the hand. You'd shape the whole block until you've got it in rough, and then you start on the detail. And that's kind of what we're doing with writing and editing. So this is, I don't know if you could call it a tool exactly, but it's my best tip for editing. Read your book aloud. You will feel like a muppet, but I don't care, because when you read it aloud, you'll be amazed at what you notice. You will notice, you know, repetition or awkwardness or sentences that go on for half a page. You'll notice when you're talking like nobody ever talked in the history of the world to another human being, you know, when you've sort of clambered behind a lectern. All the things that are going to make your book difficult to read, you will notice when you read them aloud, and you don't notice them when you read it on the page. So really, really good tip. It's a really interesting thing to do. It takes a bit of stamina, it takes a bit of time, but if you can do it, it's fantastic. So I'm just going around one thing. So the second suggestion is a bit more terrifying, because you don't have to read it aloud to people. In fact, I suggest that you don't read it aloud to people. They probably won't appreciate it. But you can involve other people by collaborating with them. And I got this tip off Guy Kawasaki, I had on the podcast a couple of years ago now, and he put his full manuscript, I can't remember what it was, I think it was Art of the Start. He put the whole thing up as a Google Doc and just invited people to comment on it. And I got a bit panicky inside when he said that, because I was at the point of, you know, nearly having a full manuscript. But I did it, and oh my goodness. So it feels really, really terrifying. And I have some people sort of say, I can't possibly do that because, you know, my intellectual property, my ideas, I don't want people to know, they'll steal my ideas. Again, I think I've said this before in these sessions, you know, ideas are 2 a penny. It's how you do them. And the benefit of getting people's engagement and involvement and feedback at this stage massively outweighs the risk. In fact, you could say it actually mitigates the risk completely, because if you have put your stake in the ground, if you have publicly owned these ideas and got people excited about them, it's actually hard for somebody to go and sort of pass those ideas off as their own, because there you are doing it up front. So, you know, if you've got the courage, I strongly suggest that you can do it as bravely as you like. You can. One of my authors at the moment has created a book friends group, which I always read as book fiends, but it's book friends, and it just means that she's got a small group of people who are kind of, you know, cheering her on, and she can ask them questions. And she's been really clear. She says, you don't have to say anything, just knowing you're there is really, really helpful. But it means she's got this sort of group of people that she can bounce ideas off, which is great, and it's a safe, closed space. Or you can go the full Guy Kawasaki and stick it up on Google and kind of invite the world. So, you know, you're in control of how much fear you want to tolerate here. But whatever you do, get people involved. This is really early stage stuff that I'm talking about, but the principle goes later on as well. When you've got your beta draft, With Practical Inspiration, we get the author to send us the beta draft. We get that out to the development editor. And at the same time, we recommend that they send their beta draft to beta readers. And we sort of give them guidance on who to select and how to select them and what to ask them and stuff. But about 4 to 6 people who are really invested in the book, who will give you really good feedback on particular areas of their expertise, or they're a target reader that can let you know if it's working or not. But involving other people feels scary, will make a massively better book. And the sooner you start, the easier it is to do. So that's it. We're on to publishing now. And it's a funny one, this. It depends how you publish. So there are 3 broad options these days, which is 2 more than there ever used to be. So there's traditional publishing, which, that's how it used to be. This is the world that I grew up in. The publisher decides whether they're going to publish a book. They take all the financial risk and cost of doing that, and they appropriate most of the revenue from the sales because, hey, they took the financial risk. That's why. The benefits of it, of course, you get a professional result. There's no cost to you as the author, and they've got the infrastructure in place, which is a really, really important piece. So I think I was going to say all publishers, it's probably a too broad a stroke, but most traditional publishers will have the capability to get your book out to the full book supply chain. So beyond Amazon to bookshops, to libraries, to institutions, and digital and print and possibly audio as well. So that's all marvelous. The downside, of course, is that you have very little coming back from that book and you have very little control. So the level of control is very low because, as I say, they're paying for it. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got self-publishing. I put a cross for professional result. I mean, that's not fair. Actually, if you assemble a really professional team around you, there are some brilliantly self-published books, but I have to say they are in the minority. Generally, you'll probably trip up on something because publishing a book is not rocket science, but it's not trivial either. So things like the fonts you use, the way that you do running heads, the back margin being slightly wider than the front margin. There's just really technical shizzle that goes on with when you're designing a book that readers wouldn't be able to tell you what's going on, but they do know that it doesn't look right when it's missing. So that's the biggest problem probably with self-publishing. No or low cost to author. There's a direct trade-off there. If you're going to get a professional result then it's going to have to be at quite high cost because you're going to have to get professionals in. But it is perfectly possible to whack a Word document through the KDP algorithm and get it up onto Amazon. So there can be absolutely no cost to you. What you're not going to be able to do is the global trade distribution piece. You're going to be able to put it out on Amazon, and that might be enough for you, but it might not be. And of course, you have very high level of control. You have complete control here. And then in the middle is kind of what I left traditional publishing to do, which is to say, well, hang on a minute, let's do this differently, which is the publishing partner model, where you get the absolute professional result and you get the global trade distribution because we're just like a publisher. It isn't at low or no cost to the author because we're seeing it as a publishing partnership and as an investment in your business. But the level of control is high. And of course, the level that you get back from the sales of the book is much higher because you took the financial risk. So just to give you a quick sort of overview of the landscape, those are the 3 main ways of doing it. And actually, Lily, I can share with you, I've done a kind of 20 questions document. If you're looking at publishing partners, caveat emptor, because some of them try to appropriate the benefits, the financial reward structure of the traditional publisher, while still requiring you to take all the financial risk. So I've got a sort of set of questions that you can ask a potential partner, and things like how much does it cost me to buy my own book? That sort of thing's really important. So that's just by way of giving you kind of overview of the landscape. In terms of publishing, the key on whichever way you're doing it, the single most important tool is the book proposal. And this is the Practical Inspiration template that we use in the proposal challenge, or at least the first bit of it. Most non-fiction book templates for proposal templates for most publishers are pretty similar. And that's because it's all the key information that a publisher needs to make sure to decide whether this is a product that they want to invest in or not. And frankly, if they need to know that, you need to know that too. So it's things like, it goes off the screen here, but the thing we start with in the proposal challenge is the reader. Who is this for specifically? What problem is it solving for them? Is that a viable market? All that kind of good stuff. So the next proposal challenge is officially showing us September, but as I hinted last week, I'm going to be doing one on the 20th of July, followed by a 2-week writing retreat. So I've set the course up in Learnworlds, but I haven't yet set up the landing page. So again, I'll send that link to Lily. And if you want to do it sooner, by all means do. But if you go to my website, you'll see the link to the September challenge. And I'll be giving September challenges an option to come into the July one if they want. So yeah, whether you do it with me or, you can download proposals from a number of different publishers, and just, you can fill it in yourself. It's a big job and you won't be getting feedback, and you won't necessarily kind of understand what they're asking for, but you can absolutely do that. And I really encourage you to use a book proposal, even if you're planning to self-publish, because it's such a powerful tool. And finally, that monster blob in the middle, which was marketing. And oh my goodness, the number of marketing tools that we could talk about and processes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to focus on a couple of really key things that you may have in place, but if you don't, these are really, really fundamental. And I'm picking on an email list because it's so fundamental to a bestseller campaign. If you want to hit number one in the Amazon charts, which is a great, bit of marketing, great thing to do. You want to call yourself a best-selling author, even though it's quite an easy tactic to do. It all starts with an email list, and it's very, very hard to achieve it without. So it also means, I think, if you have a decent email list, you can engage with people directly, and you're not at the mercy of social media channels that change their algorithms. I remember talking to a friend who had based her entire business around, well, actually, it wasn't her business, it was somebody else, and she was working with them, but they based their entire business, their entire conversion stuff on Facebook. Facebook changed their algorithms without telling everybody one day, and they saw their traffic just drop by about sort of 60–70%. And that's really dangerous. If you have an email list, then you are protected to some degree from that, because you can reach people directly, which is really important. So there are lots and lots of systems out there. We were actually just talking about this before you all came on, which to use. I started with MailChimp. Really simple, really easy to use, brilliant, free, good integrations. If you're looking for somewhere to start, I think I'd probably still recommend it. The reason I moved away from MailChimp was that they charge you per use case. So if, for example, I've got somebody who'd done 3 proposal challenges and a boot camp, and they'd signed up to some webinar or something, suddenly they were counting like 7 or 8 times, which was just useless. So because I was being charged, per user. So I moved away from that. I now use ActiveCampaign, which is a combined email automation system and CRM, which is ACE. I mean, you obviously saw that in the tech stack earlier, but there's a cost for that. So it's just whether it's right for your business. But yeah, that's the only reason I moved, really. The fact also that it integrates with LearnWorlds, which is our e-learning system. But if you haven't got any kind of email list or any kind of email automation, that's probably where you need to start with the whole marketing effort. And you don't need to do it all at once, but the big pieces of it obviously are some reason for somebody to come onto your email list, other than being your mate, because that isn't going to scale. You need some sort of maybe giveaway on your website, or some sort of form that they can sign in, or some thing that they sign up for, a product that they buy. And then you need a way of doing something with them. And whatever you choose to do with them, it's got to be sustainable. So there's no point saying, I'm going to have a weekly newsletter and it's going to be 10,000 words long and it's going to cover all the major, shifts. And you're not going to keep that up every week. So there are, Jocelyn Gly, for example, is a great example of somebody who does a monthly, really meaty email, really thoughtful. It's beautiful. And there are other people who do quick sort of weekly roundups of things. I do a newsletter every week, but it's fueled by the podcast, which is weekly, plus book recommendations and so on. So I've got, it's formulaic. People know exactly what they're going to get. It's saying, listen to this is the tip. If you're looking for a book, here's a recommendation, and it's just also a way of me hanging on. This is what's going on, and here's a discount code for it. That kind of stuff works really well. It's part of my rhythm now. So that's the email list. But I'm not saying that social media doesn't matter, because of course it does. That's where people can really discover you. That's where they get to like and know and trust you, because there's no friction. And then they might in future sign up to your email list. So the great thing is, when you're writing a book, you have got this inexhaustible well of content because of all the research you're doing, all the writing you're doing. So for goodness sake, use it to power your content strategy. And your content strategy, the thing that separates random occasional postings from an actual content strategy is really an editorial calendar. It's just having a sense of what you're doing when. I'll be honest with you, this is HubSpot's editorial calendar, because it's more beautiful and more fully featured than ours, which is a bit lame in comparison. But this is what we do. We have a kind of Trello board. And again, just don't make it any more complicated than you need it. But this is an example of how you can use it. It's kind of ideas go on the left, which is how I use my to-do list. It's kind of, stuff that's in my mind that needs to happen. And then as it kind of firms up, and as you get a title for it, and you maybe assign it to somebody, if you've got people you can assign things to, then it comes across into the next, into the pipeline, and then as it gets, as you start it, it goes into in progress, and they've got editing here. You know, if it's just you, you won't need that. You'll just have, you know, it'll be archived once it's posted. But it's just, again, a lightweight way of capturing your ideas, of deciding which channels you're going to post them to. You can see they've used flags there, the labeling, to identify which channel it's going to go to. And you can use it any way you like, but it just means you're keeping your stuff together and you know what's going where. And if you've got your table of contents and you've got an editorial calendar, you've got your content strategy nailed. I've said here, it can be a rabbit hole. It really can. You know, you can spend an awful lot of time. It's like, do you know when you were revising as a kid and you used to draw all these lovely revision count? Yeah, it can get a bit like that. You actually have to do it. So as simple as possible, but no simpler. And then once you've got your editorial calendar, you've got all your lovely content from the bookwork that you're doing, the other tool that is really, really useful is a scheduling tool. And again, you don't need this. You can just post straight natively to the platforms, but it's really helpful. I get someone else to do the actual posting because I don't need to do that. And it also means you can kind of batch it. So you can have just a day of focusing on content, writing loads of stuff, scheduling it all up. And, you know, that's great. Also, one thing I noticed was I had been posting every week about the podcast that had just come out, the podcast episode that had just come out. As soon as I realized that we had this, you know, backlist of, well, it's over 200 episodes now, and I wasn't doing anything with those, I handed that over to somebody in the team and said, look, can you put together a kind of archive of tweets about and posts about archived about old episodes? And of course, there's loads of people each time discovering for the first time. So our listening figures went up double sort of overnight, which was terrific. So don't just think about the new stuff, also think about scheduling stuff from the archive as well, because it's always going to be new to someone. So we use eClincher for the very strategic reason that AppSumo, we were doing an offer on it at the time. There are lots of different tools for doing this. Again, bit of a rabbit hole. Just find one that works for you. It's got the right kind of level of plan. Don't be paying unless you need to. I've heard, I like eClincher. You know, I wouldn't say it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, but it's fine. I've also heard good things about Meet Edgar, which is a great name, Sendable and Buffer. There are millions. So just, you know, have a look, maybe ask a few people what they use, and nearly all of them have got, well, not all of them, at least half of them have got kind of free versions that you can use with a limited number of social channels on. So, you know, fill your boots with those. But the really important thing about a content strategy is consistency. So, you know, we're talking about consistency in writing. We're also talking about consistency in posting your stuff out there. So don't commit to anything that you can't keep up. So just to bring all of that together, sorry if you're feeling a bit glassy-eyed at this point, here's a kind of possible tech stack that you could look at for your book writing systems. So you might plan using mind map software like IO or Trello. You're probably going to use one of those, to be honest with you. Put the timeline in place and say, right, I'm going to give myself this length of time. I'm going to write an average of 1,000 words a week. You know, whatever it is, that's what this looks like. This is the goal that I'm aiming for. And then feed everything, your book, the work you're going to do building a platform, your network strategy, your business goals, and your personal stuff into a 90-day plan, and just make that the kind of heartbeat of your business over the next wee while, because that holds everything. And then you might want Evernote to research. If you go with Scrivener, fantastic. You can stick it in there as well, or instead of. I've added a couple in here that we use for the creative stuff, but actually are quite useful for researching and writing as well. So Descript and Otter AI are kind of similar. They're both AI agents for transcription. So if you've got audio content, you can just literally upload it and get the script out, which is really helpful because it's really hard searching an audio file. And if you ever get writer's block, start talking. Seth Godin said on the podcast, and it was such a brilliant phrase, said, you know, writer's block, nobody ever got talker's block. And you don't, do you? You know, you can always speak. So that can be really helpful. Just, you know, press record, talk it out, get yourself over that block, and then you can have it transcribed and sort of work it up from there. So they're just two additional little, no extra charge, free tools to look at that might help you with the writing and the research if you're recording interviews, obviously. And then editing, you might want to be using Scrivener, obviously, or, oh, I didn't put Word in there, Word. Trello can be useful for editing. I don't quite know why I put that in there. I think it's moving things around. And Google Docs for the collaboration piece, if you're brave enough. Publishing, clearly, if you're working with a publisher, then the systems are their problem, not yours. But if you are going to be self-publishing, then probably the only system you're going to need is KDP, because everything else gets and KDP does everything you want to do if Amazon is all you want to reach. And then with marketing, something like MailChimp, something like Buffer, and of course the social platforms and building your profile there. So you can just see how you're using as few systems as possible, but you've got all your major stages covered. And this is the slide that I've shown at the end of each one, just stuff, you know, to help you sort of where you want to go next. I've added in a great book. I should have had, hang on a minute. Excuse me. This is a book called Sorted by Alice Jennings, which is just ace. It's so sane. She wrote the book because she was so tired of telling people what kind of systems to use for their business. It's really practical. It's really tactical. It actually names systems and compares them and stuff. So if you're interested in the bigger systems piece for your business, I really, really recommend that one. Otherwise, you've seen all the rest and you know about the proposal challenge and the July additional one. So that's it from me. I'm going to take a breath and let you ask some questions.